Hi, Sheri. Tell
Hey,
me a
Rich.
little bit about you. Who is Sheri? Who is she?
Well, what I am today is I'm the Chief Operating Officer for John Mattone Global, which is a premier executive coaching and leadership firm. And that's really stemmed from my background in business coaching and executive coaching that I started in 2005.
And I've heard a lot about your book. Tell me about your book,
Uh,
Transparent Leadership. What a title.
Oh, thanks, Rich. So, transparent leadership. I wrote this book to really help the person I used to be. So, it's a book for women, women in business, maybe entrepreneur, maybe an executive, could be an emerging leader. But women wear a lot of hats, and I felt like I wore a lot of hats over my career, and it felt like really heavy. And then I finally figured out how to embrace all those hats and really utilize them to lead others.
Do you believe, and I'll get a little bit more into the book, but do you believe that women make better leaders than men?
I don't know if they make better leaders. I think they're different leaders. So I think because women wear so many hats, they have this innate ability to adapt, right? And so
Okay.
much of leadership is about adapting to others and really, being a great listener. As a mom, you're a great listener, hopefully, right? And you're a problem solver for your children. Well, you can take all those leadership skills, right? As you're leading your family in your home and apply them in your work, in your life, everywhere, because how you show up, in one area of your life is how you show up in all areas.
This is true. This is very true. But the reason I ask is I read a Harvard Business School study a couple of years ago that the more women that are in executive leadership positions in a company, the more successful the company is long term. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think women look at things holistically. I think women have the unique ability to kind of look at the big picture and to make sure that everyone's aligned. They look at how all the puzzle pieces fit together. I also think there's more empathy, and women, here's the thing, it's not to say that men don't have empathy. I think women are willing to be more vulnerable. I think
Oh,
women are willing to get feedback, to go deep, right? And build relationships.
do you know why though? Do you know why?
You
Let me
tell
tell you
me.
something about gender intelligence. I don't know if you know this, but our brain is two lobes, right? The left and the right hemispheres. The connective tissue between the left and the right hemisphere is called the corpus callosum. The corpus callosum is actually 40% larger in women than it is in men.
That's
40%, not a little bit,
amazing.
40%, which means the left side of the brain, the logic centers, and the right side, the intuition, the creativity, the emotions, all of that empathy, that's on the right side. The left and the right are talking to each other all the time in a woman's brain, not in a man's. When a man's on his left side of the brain, the right side goes to sleep. And so if he's on the right side, the left side goes to sleep. So men think very linear. It's very logical. They're thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Women are thinking 1, 5, 17, 4, 13, 11, 7. Do you know what? And it all connects. So
Yeah.
everything in a woman's life is connected to everything else in her life. This is really important, I think, in leadership because men fix a problem linearly. What can I do right now to fix that? Women, like you use the word holistic, women are kind of looking at the bigger picture and long term and the people and everything that's involved in making that decision.
I totally agree. And I love that
Fascinating.
explanation. I love it.
Fascinating.
And it just makes sense because, I see women always trying to put the puzzle pieces together. And I see women, really smart, but also leading with heart. Women
Yep.
aren't afraid to lead with their heart. And that's what I love about, leadership and executive coaching is we're helping people create so much awareness about themselves so that they can set others up for success, right?
What's the premise of what's the message? What do people walk away with when they're done reading?
Oh, for transparent leadership.
Yeah.
Well, it's really seven keys to transparent leadership. It starts with self awareness and accountability, and
Okay.
really digging into who you are, the type of leader you are, understanding, what types of leadership styles others are so that you can adapt to that. Finding out, what are your triggers? How do you manage your emotions? Just things like that. Congruency is another key, how to be congruent in your life, how important it is to lead with integrity and what that really means. And leading with integrity, requires you to be vulnerable. How important alignment is. You're going to walk away with strategies on how to align your team.
Okay.
And measurement. Rich, you know this,
Yep.
how important measurement is to really understand how you're doing. And what I really want people to walk away with is just become the best version of yourself. Be you, do the right thing, and focus on setting other people up for success.
Oh, I
And
love that.
then yours will come.
Do you think that women leaders need to be in their masculine energy in order to be a successful leader?
I think no, I don't. I don't think you need.
You had to think about that for a second. No, I don't.
Well, gosh, I'd love to hear your definition of or your thoughts on this. Like, what is masculine energy to you? Because I I don't think of it in those terms. Like, I do think you have to be brave, you have to be bold, you have to be confident, but you can also be soft and lead with your heart and just be a really authentic person, who's going to do the right thing, who's going to do what they say they're going to do,
Okay.
and isn't afraid, to problem solve and say what they think, right? Which sometimes I think, Rich, can come across as bullish. It can be perceived by others as, man, she's got too much masculine energy.
Right.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that based on, what I just
Okay.
shared.
Okay. I'll tell you, I agree with you that they don't have to be, but I do believe a lot of women are. Because, and John wrote a great book called Work With Me, The Blind Spots in the Workplace Between Men and Women. And he calls it, we have three sexes, not two. We have the man, we have the woman, and we have the woman who acts like a man in order to be successful. But so I don't believe they need to, but I believe many women believe they need to. That if I act in my masculine energy and I lead, through linear kind of thinking and get people to do tasks and complete the job and, make the profit in business, then I'm acting like a man. The problem is when a woman acts like a man in order to do that, then she goes home to her husband and pushes him into his feminine energy because there's always that yin and yang, that energy. If she's masculine, then it's going to push him into his feminine energy. If he's in feminine energy, it's going to push her to masculine. It wasn't really designed, we're supposed to have that kind of dichotomy that fits together well. But in corporate, I think a lot of women actually believe I need to act like a man in order to be successful. I was coaching a woman here in Las Vegas at the Mandalay Bay. She was one of the only women CEOs on the strip. And she said to me, it's really hard to be in my feminine energy because all the CEO meetings are, scotch and cigars and, tough language. And so I go back to, my job and I'm doing it very masculine energy. I said to her, let's try for 1 quarter doing it in a nurturing way. Care about your employees. Ask them, how are you doing? Not did you do the job, but how are you doing? How are you feeling? And come with your feminine energy. Do you know she was the number one CEO profitability on the strip after that quarter?
I believe
Lead,
it. And
leading with her feminine energy.
so I think we're completely aligned on that now that you've shared with me that. I think it really is about having those coaching skills as a leader, as an executive, as a CEO, an entrepreneur. And again, just changing your approach. You don't have to approach everyone as a manager. I like to call it a manager. Like, we're going to do this and I'm going to manage this, and you have to hit these KPIs.
Right.
The feminine side, I think, is what you're talking about, is more like, how can I help you achieve your goals? How
Exactly.
can I help you how can I set you up for success as your leader? One of the things I talk about in my book is just getting into that daily habit of asking yourself every day, how am I going to set my team up for success? How am I going to set my son up for success today?
I love it.
Whoever it is in your life, and just getting really focused on that, right? That type of approach.
Well, that's very loving. It's also very nurturing. It's very caring. Instead of why didn't you hit your KPIs? How are you doing? What can I do to support you? What can I do to set you up for success? Not you didn't hit your numbers, you don't get the bonus.
Yeah.
That's where I think a lot of leaders come from. What are some of the
Well,
other points in the book?
so, gosh, some of the other points are just, really embrace all those hats you wear. I find, and I found this in my career, when I started having kids, when I got married, as my parents, needed more help. I was wearing all these hats, and at times it was, but I'm very driven. Like, I love my career. I love what I do. And I have a vision for my path, right? For my career path and what fulfills me. And at times you just feel like I'm juggling all this, right? But really, it's a strength. It's not that you don't have to give up one or the other. You can have it all. Just, it's all got to work in harmony, and you have to stop being so hard on yourself.
Mm. Because there's a hormone we have in our body when we're under stress called cortisol. Do you know
Yeah.
that hormone? Most people know what it is. And I don't know if you know this, but men reduce the production of cortisol by building testosterone. They build testosterone at work, doing things like fixing and solving and achieving and succeeding. All of those are testosterone generating that lowers cortisol. The work environment is not conducive to lowering cortisol in a woman's body because she needs a different hormone called oxytocin. Oxytocin is the loving and nurturing and bonding and connecting and talking, and all of that lowers cortisol. So what I have found is a lot of senior corporate executive women, they're in a position where they're not in an environment all day that builds oxytocin. It actually builds testosterone. Then they get home and they have to do all the things that my mother didn't work, cooking and cleaning and kids and, husbands and, just everything that they have to do. So their cortisol levels actually go up when they come home from work instead of like a man, they just shut down, turn off, and rebuild testosterone. So it's very
Absolutely.
interesting to me. How do you coach your women clients to lower cortisol? They're in overwhelm. They have so many things to do. How do you teach them to do that?
Well, it's interesting because I was just talking to a client about this the other day, and the whole conversation was very legitimate, definitely how she was feeling, very factual. Um, but I just said, hey, wait a second. What if we looked at this a different way? What if we approached
That's
it
coaching.
differently?
That's coaching.
Yeah. And so, what if we, instead of talking about what we're worried about and putting out fires, what if we approached it as to how we could problem solve? And so, it just totally changes, the stress levels and the mindset around, your current state. It's like I'm in a different state if I'm trying to put out a fire.
Yes,
I'm
of course.
stressed. I'm in panic mode. What if this goes wrong? It's always the what if it goes wrong. But if I can switch to how do I solve this problem, right?
And what if it goes right?
And what if it goes right? You know, it's I'm in a total, it gets me excited. It gets you excited. It makes you feel purposeful. You know, it's so a lot of times I just want people to just take a second, like think about how you're approaching this, and that's where the triggers come in. What's that trigger that just made you
Mm.
go into panic mode
Right,
or
right.
approach it that way? And triggers are really powerful because
Because
when you get to the root of the problem, whatever your emotion responded to had nothing to do with the root of the problem.
of course, of course, and we don't want to coach people on a symptom. We want to coach what's really going on underneath that.
That's right.
Hmm. Yeah, very interesting. What something that we do at Mars Venus. You produce oxytocin when you're bonding, connecting, nurturing, befriending, helping. So if you're doing that in the workplace, you can transform that workplace into an oxytocin producing environment. But I don't know if a lot of women don't know this, but you produce twice as much oxytocin when you nurture yourself. And women typically are not good at doing that. They help everybody and they're last on the list. So things
Yes,
like taking a bubble bath, putting soft music and light some candles, go out to lunch with a girlfriend, go get a spa day, things like that where you're nurturing yourself keeps that oxytocin cortisol balance in line. That's something that
absolutely.
we teach. Another thing we teach, and you talk about putting out fires. Putting out fires is urgent. We teach all women entrepreneurs and corporate executives to slow down
Yeah,
because when you're running around like a chicken, you're in your masculine energy. When you wake up and have a quiet morning routine, have a nice cup of coffee or whatever you do, get to the office and handle all those fires, as you put it, in a slower way, then you're handling in your feminine energy.
absolutely.
Slowing down is feminine.
Well, and it's interesting. That's where a lot of self reflection comes in and diving deep into awareness of who you are and why you respond and act the way you do.
I love that.
Really, like how do you change those behaviors? You know, you have to be aware of them before you can change them. And so it really takes me back to, you know, one of I think this is one of your favorites too, Rich. The quote by Jim Rohn, you know, work harder on yourself than you do on your
Yep.
business.
Yep.
And you keep growing yourself personally, and everything is going to blossom professionally. And so I find a lot of times, you know, people aren't taking the time to self care or
Ah,
just work on their, you know, triggers, their emotions, release the past, you know, really understand how they are as a leader, how they're perceived, how they want to be perceived. You know, all
ah.
that stuff
And those are
is
two different
so
things, aren't they?
two totally different things. And
Yeah.
it's so important. But a lot of times, like you said, we're caught in that masculine energy and putting out the fires and everything has to be done now, depending on what type of culture you're a part of or what type of growth you've done. We just don't take the time to do it. And it's so important, right? It'll change the entire trajectory of your life if you will
100%.
take the time to do it. So that's why I think what you guys are doing is so important, and why I'm so passionate about partnering with John Mattone Global to really develop leaders and get them to create more awareness around themselves so they can become the best version of themselves
Right.
to lead others.
And that trickles completely down. And staying in her feminine energy is where she'll get the most power.
Can I ask you both a question you're making me think of? When you're I'm thinking of the corporate environment. When you're on your way to being the leader in a corporate environment, working with and for another leader on that way. And so often women tend to mirror the person to whom they report
Yes.
instead of maintaining who they are. And that's not a fault. It's you're trying to get to the place where you can lead in the way that you feel is right. But on the way to that, you feel you need to adapt your boss's manner. Let's talk about that a second, because I think a lot of women fall into that and it's hard to manage.
And I think that's part of what I said before is that third sex is the man, the woman, and the woman who acts like a man in order to be successful. They learned that from whoever was leading them. Okay, that person is successful, so I'm going to do it the way they do it, and it should work, but it doesn't feel comfortable to them. And that's why when you mentioned the reflection, Sheri, I thought that was really good because that reflection would then say, I don't need to do it that way. Because so much of what we do is we don't think about it. It's involuntary. It's like breathing. We create habits, we create conditioned responses, and we just do it that way. Why? We don't even know why. That's how I learned it. So
Yeah.
your reflection actually stops them in their tracks and go, I don't know if I need to do it that way. Maybe I can find my own way. Maybe I can do it in my own feminine energy. Because back to 30, 40 years ago, it was a man's world, corporate. So where would a woman learn that is from whoever she reported to? That's a really good question.
Absolutely. I love that. And, that's why in our coaching process, which on Mattone Global, we call it our 7 pillars. And we take them, one critical piece of that is called a leadership story exercise. What is your leadership story?
Ooh.
Who do you want to be? How do you want to be perceived? Right. And then, we also then have them go find a mentor who emulates those qualities, those characteristics, and then ask for mentorship, which people have a hard time doing, asking for mentorship. And you don't have to ask for mentorship from the person that is leading you. You can ask for mentorship from the person who you want to model, who you want to be.
You know what's funny is one of my mentors, and I've never met her, is the old CEO of Pepsi, Noor. I don't know if you know who she is. Indian woman. I never spoke to her, but I watched everything she did, how she did it. Even though she's a woman and I didn't want to lead like a woman, I had so much I could learn from the way she spoke, her vision, the way she communicated that vision, the way she supported her team. She, in my opinion, was the epitome of a woman leader leading with her feminine energy and leading that company to unbelievable success.
Unbelievable success. And I love that so much.
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody that my mentor is a woman.
I love that. What's wrong with that? I've had women mentors. I've had men who have mentored me. But it's so funny you mentioned her because in my book, before each chapter, I quote a really female powerhouse leader that I respect and think has really paved the way for women.
Is she
and
one of
he
them?
was one of them.
Oh, great. Excellent. I'm so happy to hear that. She, to me, is an amazing woman and still balance her family and her marriage and her kids and, her personal life and her travel. I really, really, looked into exactly what she did to stay in that balance.
Yeah. You want to hear the quote I quoted from her? You're going to love it. This is from your mentor. Leadership is hard to define and good leadership even harder. But if you can get people to follow you to the ends of the earth, you're a great leader.
I love it. That's her.
And it's funny because that's part of my book about vision. There's a chapter on vision. You got to have vision. And people always say, why aren't you buying into, I can't get my team to buy into my vision. And I'm like, because they're not buying into you, right? Do they want to follow you? Because they're going to have to want to follow you before they're willing to buy into your vision.
Right. And take that in turn, then the customers of that business are not going to follow the employees who is not following the leader. You remember that clock.
The cycle.
The owner, right. The cycle. Well, the cycle is going backward in that business.
Absolutely.
Going counterclockwise.
Yeah. So, hey, can I tell you something really quick about my book, Rich?
Yes,
because I really want to encourage others to just the evolution of my book. I think everyone has a story, and it's really finding your story, and once you do, you're really able to make a huge impact. I mean, on the world, right? I wrote the outline for this book 9 years ago. 9 years ago.
Wow.
And I literally just finished this book, and it didn't change. The 7 keys didn't change, but I wasn't ready for 2 reasons. One, I hadn't experienced enough, right?
Okay.
And
Or so you thought. Or so you thought.
so I thought, but look, there's a lot of stories woven in here that happens, in the last 9 years. But I didn't know who I wanted to write the book for. I was like, transparent leadership really could apply to everyone. And what really did it for me is I was like, I want to help the person I used to be.
I
And
love that.
that's
You said
why
that at the very beginning, and I really love that you actually wrote it to you.
I just want to help women in business. And hey, I love men too. I've been married 25 years. I love men. But I'm just really passionate about it because I was this person in this book looking for this type of help, not only for someone to tell me it's okay, everything you're doing is right, don't be so hard on yourself, but also giving me the shortcuts, to get there, to develop my team, to become the best version of myself, to become a leader that others wanted to follow. And so I include in here, a lot of strategies, and it's like, hey, just pick one.
Right.
Just pick one and start doing it. Here's I'm going to hopefully accelerate your growth. So everybody has a story, and that's relatable.
It's interesting you say that because one of our Mars Venus coaches in Scotland came to our global conference. We have a global conference every year. In fact, this year it's going to be in Bali. It's going to be amazing.
Amazing.
But last year it was here in Vegas.
Do you want me to come speak? Don't worry, we won't put that in.
Bali? Yes, that would be amazing. But we can talk about that offline. But he comes and he's an amazing marketing guy. He has a marketing company along with being a Mars Venus coach. So he markets his Mars Venus coaching just as well as he markets for other companies. So he's really good. And he said, I'll come into the conference and I'll do a presentation on marketing. He gets up in front of the group, and I'll just give you a little history. The guy had a disease when he was a young man. He was about 8 or 9 years old, and he lost his eye, and it had a tumor here in his head, and this cheekbone was missing. And the doctor said when he was about 8 years old, you're not going to make it to 15. He's now 55, 56. He said, I've lived every single day as if this is my last day, which personally, I don't know if I could do that. And as he was talking for this hour, I started looking around. Everybody was in tears, including me. I can actually feel it right now as I'm telling you the story. And so he spent 55 minutes talking about his whole life story. And then he said, and that's marketing. And I went, what? I thought he was going to teach us how to market. He said exactly what you just said. Everybody has a story. And his story was so compelling that one of the things he said is, when I look at people, I don't see faces. I see stories.
Yeah.
And I went, and I actually left the meeting walking down the hall with all these people around going, story, story, story. I started looking at people so differently because that story touched me. He's an amazing guy. He's been married and then his wife left him. He had a daughter and she wound up, leaving him. He had a business that collapsed. He did all this stuff thinking today is my last day.
Yeah.
What an amazing, touching story. And then ended it with, and all I could think of is, where's the marketing part? And then he goes, and that's marketing. And I went, how fantastic is that?
Just like that, relatable relationships. He drew everyone in.
There wasn't a dry eye in the audience. And I knew you could see clearly there was a challenge, but none of us knew the story. And when we heard the story, it was so touching. And then that's how he markets himself. And I went, that's amazing.
You know what I love about that too, though? I mean, it all comes full circle, right? He was just being his authentic self and he
Yep.
was willing to tell his story. And that's what leadership is about too.
You know
Just,
what he said though? And I remember now, he's at the very end, he said, and I've never told this story to anyone. This feeling that I had that I would die today. It was my last day. It was my last day. He goes, I got used to today being my last day and I'm going to make it amazing. I thought, what a
that's
guy,
awesome.
right?
That's incredible.
Hmm.
Okay, we had a natural pause. I think you've done a great job, both of you. But I'd like
What did you
to,
expect, Ann? What did you really expect? I
I
connect with
expected
Sheri.
no less. I expected no, both my masculine and feminine side expected no less.
Okay, good.
Oh my
How about
gosh.
your feminine side, James? What do you think?
He can't be on though. He's a
Oh,
producer. So what I want you to do though is button it up for me and just let's close with what you want the person watching or listening to the podcast get from this podcast as far as you personally are concerned. So give it
you
some
want to go
thought.
first, Sheri, and then I'll go? You could actually say that out loud. What I'd want everybody listening to this.
Yes, what I would like everyone to take from this that's listening or watching.
I don't
This
know.
is
Well, you go. You go, Rich.
Okay.
Go,
What
Rich.
I would really like people to take away from this podcast is a couple things. One, understanding your book that leadership is an art. In my opinion, it's not you're a leader or you're not. You can actually learn these leadership skills, especially as a woman. Do you know what I mean? Learning to lead with your feminine energy. I think it's so important that people understand that, you're either a born leader or you're not. I don't agree with that. I really think that you can learn to be a leader. I think you can learn to be authentic and genuine. And as you call it, transparent. I think what a great word to use. And I think underneath that, attaching gender intelligence to that transparency would make any woman a powerful leader. I think it's just something that we can move society forward by teaching people to be authentic, whether they're man or woman, align with that energy, team up, get a mentor, as you said, follow those 7 tips that you're giving them, those 7 principles. And I think we can change the world one business at a time. How was
Love
that,
it.
Ann? How was that?
perfect. Perfecto. Now,
Oh,
what you
gosh.
can focus on is obviously he did a wonderful job on your book, but what you've learned with regard to that and the gender intelligence and how that harmony sits with you for now. And then just simply what you want them to get from this conversation.
You want to script it for me? I don't know. There's so much, I'm not good at, I'm great at
You,
wrapping this up,
you
but
are.
no, if I say I'm not good, then it's in my head, right? Um,
Well, you said it earlier, what you want them to walk away with, because that was one of my questions. It's the same answer here.
yeah. So what I want viewers to walk away with, listeners of the podcast, is just, I want them to feel empowered. I want them to have confidence. I want them to know that they're enough and that when at times when life, feels really heavy because you're wearing all these hats, just know that those are actually your unique abilities and that, we all go through seasons and times. So if things feel really hard right now, it's just a season in time, but you're powerful and we all have a responsibility to lead others. The future work and the next generation are depending on us to become the best version of ourselves and lead them in the right direction. In addition to the books that we were talking about, I'd also like to recommend that our listeners read The Intelligent Leader to really help create some self-awareness around their leadership abilities and their style to lead others.
Love it.